Welcome to What the F Happened, Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast where we break down what's actually happening across fraud, scams, AML, and financial crime.
Each episode cuts through the noise to explain the tactics, trends, and real-world impact behind the headlines, so you're better prepared for what comes next. Let's get into it. So imagine for just a second that you work in this incredibly high-stakes environment where you report directly to two different bosses.
Oh man, that's always rough.
Right. And the first boss demands that you move at absolute lightning speed. Like, if you aren't producing immediate, actionable results the exact second a problem arises, you are failing.
Okay, stressful.
Yeah. But your second boss demands this meticulously documented, painstakingly detailed mathematical explanation for every single move you make.
Wow.
And if you miss a single step in your documentation, you're also failing. I mean, it sounds like a total nightmare scenario.
That sounds impossible, honestly.
Exactly. But for Canadian financial institutions in 2026, this isn't some hypothetical stress stream. It is their everyday operational reality.
Yeah, it's the ultimate operational paradox. You have these huge institutions trying to function at the speed of modern digital finance while simultaneously being weighed down by, the heaviest regulatory anchor we have seen in decades.
Right.
And the consequences for failing to satisfy either of those demands are just staggering.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. We really want to explore exactly how Canadian fraud and AML, that's anti-money laundering teams, are surviving this unprecedented pressure cooker.
Yeah, it's quite the balancing act.
It really is. And we're building this picture today from a couple of highly detailed roadmaps. We have an OSFI 2026 operational update and a comprehensive compliance readiness guide from DataVisor.
Both really crucial documents right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because even if you don't spend your days worrying about banking compliance, what we're looking at here is a fascinating real-time window into how massive, complex systems handle the collision of artificial intelligence, intense government oversight, and, real-time threat detection.
Yeah, and that collision is completely reshaping the architecture of the entire financial sector. I mean, the technology that moves money has evolved so rapidly that the old ways of governing it, they've simply collapsed.
They just can't keep up.
Exactly. They couldn't scale.
So let's start with the most visceral change on the ground. The end of what they call the binder era.
Right, yeah.
The grace periods for these financial institutions to get their houses in order, they're officially over.
Long gone.
Right. The Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, which we'll just call OSFI for short, has fully activated its integrity and security guideline.
And that is a huge deal.
It is. It means expanded personnel, background check mandates, and this completely new style of examination.
Yeah, because for a very long time, the standard procedure for a bank facing an audit was essentially a theatrical paper exercise.
What do you mean by theatrical?
Well, you'd have these massive, comprehensive policy manuals like literal binders sitting on a dusty shelf somewhere. You'd conduct these scheduled annual reviews, and when the examiners came knocking, you just pointed to the binders and said, look, we are safe because we have a written policy for that.
But the current OSFI supervisory cycle has shifted entirely away from that static documentation. Now they want live operational evidence.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of being back in school. You used to have a teacher who would just walk down the aisle, glance at your desk, and check to see if you had your homework filled out.
Yeah, and you could basically fake it.
Exactly. You just had some scribbles on the page. But now that same teacher is standing right over your shoulder, handing you a piece of chalk and making you solve the complex math problem live on the chalkboard.
Yeah, you watch your every move.
Yes. But wait, I have to jump in here because we're talking about massive legacy banking institutions. Some of these places are still running on mainframes built in the 1990s.
Oh, absolutely.
So how can a bank possibly pivot from doing an annual paper review to providing live, real-time proof of threat detection without entirely halting their day-to-day operations? Isn't this an impossible engineering standard?
You're right to be skeptical because they absolutely cannot halt operations. I mean, the financial system never sleeps.
Right.
What's fascinating here is the underlying philosophy driving that change in the server room. Regulators have finally internalized that a static document written 6 months ago does absolutely nothing to stop a malicious cyber vector that's happening right now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So fraud detection infrastructure is no longer just viewed as a neat software tool to save the bank from minor losses. It's being evaluated as a core pillar of operational resilience.
So the examiner doesn't want to read your data classification policy.
Exactly. They want to sit at a terminal
Yeah.
and watch how your data streams actively prevent an insider threat in real time as the data is actually flowing.
But again, the legacy systems.
Right. If your security relies on a human analyst remembering to follow a protocol written in a PDF or, manually pulling data from a legacy mainframe to prove a point to an examiner, you've already failed the exam. The only bridge between those legacy systems and this new live evidence standard is intelligent, automated infrastructure. The threats are dynamic, so the proof must be dynamic.
Okay, so if the standard is live operational evidence, we really have to look at who is actually in the room demanding it. Because the bank isn't just dealing with one strict teacher at the chalkboard.
Oh, there now.
They're dealing with two completely different entities, and they have incredibly conflicting demands. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah, this is the crux of it.
The tension between OSFI and FINTRAC is the defining structural challenge of 2026.
Because both of these watchdogs want a safe, secure financial system. I mean, that's the shared goal.
Right.
But their specific mandates create a massive operational bottleneck for the banks trying to please both of them simultaneously.
Let's break down the mechanics of this tightrope. On one side, you have OSFI. Their mandate is heavily focused on prudential model rigor, risk governance, and system explainability.
Which is a mouthful.
It is. But when we say prudential model rigor, what we basically mean is they want mathematical proof that your system is stable.
Yes.
They want to know exactly how the engine is built, what variables carry the most weight, and why the engine turns the way it does.
Right. They want to see the blueprints.
Exactly. But then on the other side, you have entreaty. They are the tactical side of the house.
Very tactical.
Their focus is tactical dispatch and the immediate effectiveness of suspicious transaction reports, or STRs. They want highly contextualized alerts routed to law enforcement immediately.
Because they need to catch the bad guys before the money actually leaves the country.
Right.
And if you look closely at how software actually functions, you start to see why optimizing for one of those mandates actively sabotages the other.
How so?
Well, if a bank tunes its compliance software to satisfy OSFI's demand for rigorous, step-by-step model validation, it introduces a ton of friction into the system.
Oh, because of all the documentation?
Exactly. It takes processing time and human analyst time to document every single logical pathway an AI took to reach a conclusion. And that friction slows down how fast you can adjudicate an alert.
Okay, but if you decide to prioritize speed, if you rush those alerts out the door to satisfy FINTRAC's hunger for rapid disclosures, you end up stripping away all the deep analysis.
Precisely. You submit these thin, context-poor reports that basically just say, hey, this transaction looks weird.
And those fail FINTRAC's quality benchmarks anyway because they aren't actionable for law enforcement.
Right.
To use an analogy, it's like being a chef where the first food critic, OSFI, is grading you on the precise, documented molecular science of your recipe.
I love this analogy.
Yeah. They want a spreadsheet detailing the exact origin and chemical breakdown of every single grain of salt you used. Meanwhile, the second critic, FINTRAC, is standing at the exact same table with a stopwatch, demanding immediate delivery of the meal.
And the chef is completely trapped.
Yeah.
The reason this dual exposure exists today is because an undefendable AI model is now legally classified as a regulatory liability.
Undefendable meaning you can't explain it.
Right. If you deploy a machine learning system to catch fraud, but you cannot instantly demonstrate to an examiner exactly why a specific transaction was flagged or why a different one was cleared to proceed, you are exposed.
So you can't sacrifice explainability for speed, and you can't sacrifice speed for explainability.
Exactly. The infrastructure has to deliver both simultaneously.
Okay, but if human analysts physically cannot type fast enough to satisfy FINTRAC while documenting enough math to satisfy OSFI, the banks are basically forced to rely on artificial intelligence to bridge the gap.
They have no other choice.
But that brings us to a major reckoning happening right now under Guideline E23, which governs model risk management. This guideline essentially spells the death of the black box AI.
Yeah, Guideline E23 is arguably the most disruptive piece of regulation to hit data science teams in banking. Oh, for sure. Historically, you could just feed an AI millions of past transactions, and it would learn to spot fraud through these hidden patterns. Because the black box data goes in, a risk score comes out, and nobody really knows what happened in the middle.
But E23 makes that illegal.
Completely. It mandates live model validation and automated drift detection.
Let's spend a minute on data drift, because I think understanding the mechanics of this is crucial.
It really is.
So, a fraud detection model might be highly effective in quarter one, but it can become completely obsolete by quarter three simply because consumer behavior changes.
Right.
For example, let's say the AI was trained to recognize that a $50 e-transfer at 2 a.m. is totally normal because, millions of college students buy late-night pizza.
A very common pattern.
Right. So the model learns $50 at 2 a.m. equals pizza, clear the transaction. But suddenly, a sophisticated new mule network starts using $50 e-transfers at 2 a.m. to test stolen accounts.
And the model just sees the transaction, thinks pizza, and lets the criminals right through.
Because the real-world reality has drifted away from the historical training data.
That is the exact mechanism of failure. And under E23, the regulators expect the bank's system to proactively surface that model deterioration before it leads to a massive surge in false negatives.
So the AI has to monitor itself.
Yes, it has to alert the humans that its own logic is becoming outdated.
Wow. But I think the wildest part of E23 is the mandate for alert-level explainability.
Oh, this is a game changer.
The days of an analyst getting a system flag that just says 98% risk factor are over. They now need automated natural language narrative summaries.
Which means the system has to generate a plain English paragraph explaining exactly why it calculated that 98% score based on the specific variables of that exact transaction.
But hold on, I have to push back on this.
Okay, go ahead.
If I have a machine learning model that successfully blocks 98% of fraudulent wire transfers, saving the bank millions of dollars, why does anyone care how it reached that conclusion?
It's a fair question.
Like, if it's stopping the bad guys, shouldn't the results matter more than the math behind it?
Well, it is entirely logical to focus on the success rate, but you have to consider the mechanics of the remaining 2%.
The false positives.
Exactly. Imagine you are traveling overseas, you try to pay for your hotel, and your legitimate bank account is instantly frozen.
That would be terrifying.
Right. You call the bank, panicking, and the analyst on the phone looks at their screen and says, well, the computer gave you a 98% risk score. You ask what you did wrong, and the analyst replies, I don't know, the computer won't tell us, it just outputs a number.
Oh.
Yeah, that's not great.
The sheer panic and lack of recourse in that situation is entirely unacceptable. Transparency is non-negotiable. Automated fraud flags must generate explicit, human-readable explanations to satisfy internal teams, to prove the math to external examiners, and ultimately to protect the consumer from undefendable system actions.
That paints a very stark picture. If my account is frozen, the computer said so, isn't a legal defense.
It definitely isn't. But here is the wrinkle. Banks don't usually build these advanced AI tools from scratch. They rely heavily on specialized fintech partners.
They outsource a lot of it.
Right. They outsource for things like device fingerprinting, analyzing how you hold your phone or type on your keyboard, or biometric screening. And according to guidelines B10 and B13, outsourcing the technology does not mean you get to outsource the risk.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, third-party vendor governance has always been a massive vulnerability for large enterprises.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. A bank might buy a shiny, highly effective AI scoring algorithm from a vendor, plug it into their data stream, and just assume they're protected. Guidelines B10 and B13 obliterate that assumption.
So the bank cannot claim ignorance about how a third-party vendor's AI functions?
Exactly.
Compliance leaders now have to execute what is called an effective challenge. They literally have to force their tech partners to provide transparent model logic using documented, repeatable test scripts.
It's a huge shift in the power dynamic.
It reminds me of hiring a contractor to build your house. If the roof collapses, the city holds you accountable, not just the contractor. You can't just say, well, the builder said the wood was good.
It's exactly like plugging a mystery external hard drive into your company's highly secure mainframe.
Oh, yeah.
You might trust the vendor who handed you the drive, but if a virus on that drive wipes your entire system, the regulator doesn't care who handed it to you. They hold you accountable for plugging it in without knowing exactly what code was on it.
And creating that transparency is incredibly difficult because of the friction it causes with vendors, right?
Yeah. Because if you are a specialized tech startup, your proprietary algorithm is your entire business model. It's your secret sauce.
Right. So why would a startup let a massive bank tear apart their proprietary algorithm to see how it works just to satisfy OSFI?
They don't want to. But the new guidelines dictate that the bank remains fully liable for model errors. This effective challenge means the bank has to mathematically document exactly how that vendor's algorithm is going to perform under extreme volume spikes or when faced with evolving, unforeseen threat scenarios.
They really have to put it through its
They
paces.
have to prove that the external data streams perfectly match their own internal risk appetites. You cannot just accept a vendor's marketing brochure as proof of compliance. If the vendor won't open the black box, the bank simply cannot legally use the tool.
Wow. But having the right transparent vendor tools is completely useless if your internal data is fractured.
This is such an important point.
And that brings us to how these teams actually structure their information to catch bad actors, because criminals are actively looking for the gaps between systems.
They thrive in the gaps.
Yeah. And the single greatest cause of multi-vector compliance failure today is siloed data.
Silos are the enemy of intelligence. Historically, fraud teams and AML teams have operated in completely separate universes within the same bank.
Which is crazy to think about.
It really is. They use separate databases, they report to different executives, they have completely different mandates.
But the threats don't operate in silos. In the sources, they mention things like green fraud and carbon credit manipulation. It sounds like a sci-fi thriller. Modern financial crime is so complex, making unified telemetry absolutely vital.
Let's walk through how a modern criminal actually exploits this. Say, a sophisticated mule network executes a rabbit account opening online.
Okay.
A few hours later, they follow it up with a series of structured shell company deposits. A siloed system misses the connection completely.
Because the fraud team only sees the first part.
Right, the fraud team might just see an account opening that looks slightly anomalous, but it doesn't cross their specific threshold, so they clear it.
And the AML team.
The AML team might see a deposit that falls just under the $10,000 reporting threshold, so they clear it. Neither action alone triggers an alarm.
But when you look at them together, the sequence is a massive red flag indicating complex financial crime.
And that is exactly why unifying those fractured data streams into a single dynamic transaction monitoring layer is vital. By combining fraud and AML telemetry into one unified terminal, the institution can detect those complex multi-vector threats before they escalate into systemic failures.
So this is how they solve the dual boss problem.
Unifying these streams is the exact tactical benefit used to finally balance that OSFI and FINTRAC tightrope we talked about earlier.
Oh, I see. If all the data from every department is flowing into one place, the AI can instantly generate the mathematical explanation for OSFI and simultaneously package the rich, highly contextualized report for FINTRAC at lightning speed.
Yes, it creates a complete holistic story of the customer's behavior instead of just throwing fragmented, meaningless alerts at an exhausted human analyst.
And speaking of the human analyst, OSFI is heavily scrutinizing what they call human-in-the-loop orchestration.
They're very focused on this.
Because even with all this unified AI, human oversight is still required for complex adjudications, right? But OSFI mandates that any time an analyst or system manager manually overrides a machine-generated risk decision, the system must record an indelible, time-stamped audit trail.
Right. Does that mean every single click is cracked?
That's exactly what it means. You can't just click ignore alert because it's 4:55 p.m. on a Friday and you want to go home.
Oh, wow.
You have to leave a permanent digital fingerprint explaining exactly why your human intuition disagreed with the machine's mathematical logic.
That is intense.
It is. Which brings us to the ultimate practical reality check for anyone managing these systems. How do you know if your team has actually achieved this unified, transparent state, or if you were on the brink of a regulatory disaster?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, and the Data Advisor Guide provides a 15-point diagnostic test. It's a self-assessment matrix that scores a bank's readiness based on verified automated capabilities versus unvalidated manual workarounds.
And let me tell you, it is a very sobering metric for a lot of institutions.
Yeah.
When you tally up the score, it breaks down into 3 distinct tiers of operational reality.
Okay, what's the first tier?
So if you score between 0 and 6, you have a critical capability gap. This means your infrastructure relies on unchecked black box models and fractured data silos.
And at that 0 to 6 level, you expose your institution to significant regulatory findings, massive fines, and immediate action is required just to keep the doors open.
Exactly. The next tier is if you score between 7 and 12. This classifies you as manually defendable.
Manually defendable, so they have the data.
This means you technically possess the necessary data to satisfy the regulators, but harvesting that data requires massive manual analyst effort.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
Yeah, the 7 to 12 range is where the human cost of poor technology becomes very real. A system in that state relies on extreme stress, massive alert backlogs, and severe staff burnout just to survive a standard multi-week supervisory examination.
I mean, think about your own workplace right now. How often are you relying on manual heroics to get things done? You know, someone's staying at their desk until midnight, copying and pasting data from 3 different legacy spreadsheets just to make a single compliance report work. Because in the world of 2026 financial compliance, an 8 out of 15 means your team is headed for a wall.
Oh, they will break under the pressure of a live examination. It is completely unsustainable.
So what's the goal?
True readiness isn't a state of panic triggered by a regulatory notice. It has to be a standard, effortless daily posture. That is what the top tier represents.
The 13 to 15 range.
Right. A score of 13 to 15 means you are compliant and automated. You have a low audit risk.
Because at that level, your operational environment naturally surfaces transparent logic data.
Yes.
You have deployed intelligent infrastructure that is compliant by design. What that means is you have transformed compliance from an agonizing administrative chore into a native, seamless software output.
The system is doing the heavy lifting of explanation and documentation automatically in the background.
Compliance becomes the natural exhaust fumes of simply doing the job correctly.
I love that phrasing.
So, what does this all mean? If we step back and look at the whole picture, Canadian financial compliance in 2026 is an incredibly high-stakes balancing act.
It truly is.
On one side, you have OSFI demanding rigorous, mathematically explainable AI, testing the absolute molecular science of your server room operations. On the other side, you have FINTRAC holding the stopwatch, demanding rapid, highly contextualized intelligence to stop criminals in real time.
And you absolutely cannot rely on static binders sitting on a shelf anymore.
Right, and you cannot hide behind proprietary black box algorithms that just output a number and say the computer said so. You have to break down internal data silos, force transparency from your external vendors, and build a system that proves its own logic at the speed of modern finance.
You know, this raises an important question, one that extends far beyond the server rooms of massive banks.
Oh.
Yeah. If these financial institutions are now legally required to deploy AI systems that generate real-time, plain-language explanations for every single decision they make, proving definitively exactly how and why they reach a conclusion. How long until everyday citizens demand that exact same alert-level explainability from the algorithms dictating our healthcare diagnostics, our social media news feeds, or our justice system?
Wow. That is a brilliant thought to leave on. The standard for radical transparency isn't just a banking regulation. It is being forged right now as a blueprint for how humans interact with machines. It's about forcing complex systems to explain themselves in plain language. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you some powerful new context. Stay curious, keep looking behind the curtain, and keep questioning the systems working behind the scenes in your own life. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to What the F Happened? Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast by DataVisor. If you want to keep learning between episodes, check out Defend Training, a set of self-paced online courses for fraud and financial crime professionals, practical and built around real-world scenarios.
And you can earn CPE credits through the ACFE San Francisco Bay Area chapter. You can find it at datavisor.com/defendtraining. The link's in the description.